Assassin's Creed is not a game about stabbing people in haystacks. It's a sci-fi horror franchise about an ancient species that engineered humanity into slavery and everything that went wrong after. Today, I'm breaking down what the entire series is actually about, starting with an origin story that makes zero sense for a game about climbing buildings. The Isu era and the Human Rebellion. Around 80,000 BCE, a species called the Isu created humans, not as equals, not as companions, as a workforce. They engineered a neurotransmitter into the human brain that made us susceptible to mind control through devices called Pieces of Eden. You pick up the glowing orb, you do what you're told. But here's where it gets interesting. Some Isu started having children with humans, and these hybrids, including two you might recognize as Adam and Eve, were born without that control neurotransmitter. The Pieces of Eden didn't work on them. They could think for themselves, which is, a problem when your entire civilization runs on slave labor. Around 75,010 BCE, these hybrids led a decade-long rebellion against their creators, and the three Isu scientists watching this unfold, Minerva, Jupiter, and Juno, each developed completely different ideas about what to do with humanity. Those competing philosophies drive literally every plot beat in the franchise for the next 77,000 years. Here's the thing that recontextualizes every speech about freedom in this series. Human free will is not a feature, it's a bug, a genetic accident born from forbidden hybridization. The entire assassin philosophy is built on a biological glitch, but at least the Isu had a plan. Unlike the Templars who show up next, swinging swords in the Holy Land with zero understanding of what they're actually fighting over. The Third Crusade and the Apple of Eden. July 1191. An assassin named Altair ibn Lahad walks into Solomon's temple with one job: recover a glowing orb from Templar Grandmaster Robert de Sablé. He fails, spectacularly. His arrogance gets his team killed, the Templars keep the artifact, and he's demoted back to novice rank. Not exactly the origin story you'd expect for the guy who reshapes the entire Brotherhood, but here's where it gets interesting. Al-Mualim, Altair's mentor, sends him on a redemption tour. 9 Templar leaders across the Holy Land. Altair dismantles the network piece by piece and eventually recovers the Apple of Eden. Mission accomplished, right? Turns out no. Because Al-Mualim never intended to destroy the apple, he intended to use it. The moment this thing lands in his hands, the man who spent decades preaching about freedom decides he's going to mind control both Crusaders and Saracens into peace. His argument? I can do it better than they would have. Which is, exactly what a Templar would say. The apple works by hijacking a neurotransmitter the Isu engineered into the human brain thousands of years earlier. It projects illusions, compels obedience, or just straight up kills you through mental overload. Altair kills him, and then does something nobody expected. He doesn't destroy the apple, and he doesn't use it. He reforms the Brotherhood from the ground up. Here's the layered irony nobody talks about. This entire story is actually just a data extraction happening in September 2012. A bartender named Desmond Miles is strapped into a machine called the Animus at Abstergo Industries, and modern-day Templars are mining his genetic memory to find that apple. Medieval thriller on the surface, corporate espionage underneath. But if you think a single apple of Eden caused problems, wait until you hear what happens when a pope gets his hands on one. The Renaissance and the Vatican vault. Ezio Auditore spends decades climbing from a grieving Florentine teenager to the most dangerous man in Italy, all to kill the people who murdered his family. Standard revenge story. Except his target list keeps pointing upward until he's standing in front of the Pope himself, and not just any Pope. Rodrigo Borgia, Pope Alexander VI, is simultaneously the head of the Catholic Church and the Grand Master of the Templar Order, which is, not ideal for separation of church and secret society. Here's the thing. Borgia doesn't want the papacy for the hat. He wants it because underneath the Sistine Chapel there's a door that requires 2 pieces of Eden to open: the papal staff, which he already has, and Ezio's apple. In 1499, Ezio fights his way into the Vatican, beats the Pope half to death, and opens that door himself. What's behind it changes everything. Inside is a chamber built by the Isu tens of thousands of years before Christianity existed, before Rome existed, before humans had agriculture, and standing in the middle of it is a holographic projection of Minerva, one of the Isu scientists who survived the first apocalypse. She starts talking. Ezio listens, expecting answers. She's not talking to him. She looks through Ezio, says the name Desmond, and delivers a warning about a solar catastrophe coming in 2012. Ezio just stands there asking, "Who is Desmond?" while the projection ignores him completely. This is the moment Assassin's Creed stops being a historical conspiracy thriller and becomes something else entirely. Every memory Desmond relived wasn't just backstory, it was a letter addressed to him, written across centuries by a dead civilization. But if a vault under the Vatican feels like the weirdest thing the Isu built, wait until you hear about what they hid in the Caribbean. The golden age of piracy and the observatory, Edward Kenway is a Welsh privateer who, between 1715 and 1722, stumbles into the entire Assassin-Templar conflict by accident. His plan? Impersonate a dead assassin, collect the bounty, and sail off into the sunset. Which is, not exactly a noble origin story. But here's where it gets interesting. The thing everyone's fighting over in the Caribbean isn't an apple or a staff. It's the observatory, an Isu structure that can surveil any human being on Earth in real time. The catch? It needs a sample of that person's blood as a genetic key. One drop, and you can watch them eat breakfast, plan a coup, or do literally anything else from thousands of miles away. A blood-keyed global surveillance network built by an extinct precursor species. If that doesn't sound like the world's most terrifying ancestry website, I don't know what does. The guy who actually knows how the observatory works is Bartholomew Roberts, and he's not just some pirate, he's a sage, a human being who carries the DNA and fragmented memories of an Isu named Aita. Think of it as forced reincarnation. Aida's genetic code keeps popping up throughout history in random people, all part of Juno's centuries-long scheme to escape her digital prison and return to the physical world. Roberts doesn't serve the Assassins or the Templars. He serves himself, and maybe Juno, which breaks the neat two-faction system entirely. Oh, and Edward, he's Connor's grandfather, Haytham's father. This pirate who started the game chasing gold ends up founding the bloodline that fights in the American Revolution. Meanwhile, in the modern day, you're playing as an Abstergo Entertainment employee, packaging Edward's memories into a consumer product. The Templars aren't just hunting artifacts anymore. They're selling genetic memory as content. But if the Templars commodifying the past sounds dystopian, wait until you see what they do with an actual revolution, the American and French revolutions. Most people assume the American Revolution section of this franchise is just assassins help the good guys win freedom. It's not, it's way darker than that. The emotional centerpiece is Connor, real name Radonhanakaton, a half-Kanyenkehaka assassin who spends the entire Revolutionary War fighting his own father, Haytham Kenway. Haytham is the Templar Grand Master of the colonies. Family reunions must have been a nightmare, but this isn't just a cool boss fight setup. It's the entire ideological war condensed into a single bloodline. Father believes humanity needs structure and control to thrive. Son believes humanity deserves the chaos of its own choices. They're both partially right, and they both lose something irreplaceable by the end. But here's where it gets genuinely uncomfortable. During the Revolutionary War, Freemasons physically transported an apple of Eden from Europe to the American colonies. Across the Atlantic, a Templar sage named Germain was engineering the French Revolution with a sword of Eden, using it to install chaos, bring down the monarchy, and reshape power entirely. Liberty, equality, fraternity, possibly amplified by a glowing alien sword that literally bends human will and loyalty. Think about what that implies. The franchise is straight up asking whether the foundational moments of modern democracy were genuinely chosen by the people who bled for them, or whether small groups with Isu mind control technology nudged entire populations toward revolution. Did the French people storm the Bastille because they wanted to, or because someone pointed an ancient weapon at them and said go? The game never gives you a clean answer, which is, not ideal. The era also shaders the neat assumption that assassins always equal revolutionaries and Templars always back kings. Templars adapt. They learn to thrive within republican systems just fine. And some assassins watch these revolutions play out and quietly realize that the new boss looks suspiciously identical to the old boss wearing a different hat. But at least revolutions only reshape governments. The next era involves an artifact that reshapes the human body itself, the Industrial Revolution and the Shroud. Up until now, the Assassin-Templar War has mostly been about who controls what people think. Apels manipulate minds, observatories spy on everyone, vaults deliver cosmic prophecies. But in Victorian London, the Templars get interested in something far more unsettling. They stop asking how do we control what people believe, and start asking what if our leader literally cannot die? The Shrouds of Eden are pieces of Eden shaped like cloths. That's it. They look like something you'd find crumpled at the bottom of a hospital laundry bin, but they're actually nanotechnological matter regenerators designed by the Isu, capable of healing mortal wounds, curing disease, and potentially reversing aging entirely. Wrap a dying man in one and his cells just start rebuilding themselves. like nothing happened, which is, not ideal when a Templar gets hold of one. And that's exactly what happens. By the 1860s, the Templars have fully pivoted from a knightly order into something much closer to a corporate machine. Railways, factories, banks, they don't need swords anymore when they own the systems that keep an entire population fed, employed, and obedient. London's Templar Grand Master doesn't sit on a throne, he sits on a board of directors. This is the direct ancestor of Abstergo Industries, and the shift happens right here in the smoking industry of the Victorian era. Their endgame? A shroud hidden beneath a major British landmark. Use it to create an immortal, unkillable leader, someone who survives every assassination attempt, every revolution, every inconvenient election. Permanent rule through permanent life. Here's where it connects forward. The Shroud of Turin, that famous burial cloth supposedly wrapped around resurrected holy figure, in universe, it might just be a misidentified piece of Eden. And later, Juno's followers seek out shrouds for an even wilder reason, giving their trapped digital goddess an actual physical body. Victorian power grab meets post-human resurrection scheme. But all of this, the artifacts, the temples, the cosmic warnings, they've been building toward one specific person in one specific year. And his story is genuinely tragic. The Desmond Miles modern tragedy. Desmond Miles is a guy who was born into an assassin compound, trained from childhood to fight a war he never asked for, and his response to all of that was to run away and become a bartender in New York, which, honestly, fair enough. But here's the thing about running from a millennia-old secret war when your DNA is basically a treasure map. They find you. Abstergo Industries kidnaps him in September 2012, designates him Subject 17, and straps him into the Animus to mine his ancestors' memories for Piece of Eden locations. He relives Altair's life, Ezio's life, decades of other people's trauma downloaded directly into his skull, and the side effects are exactly as bad as that sounds. The bleeding effect starts leaking ancestral combat skills into his waking consciousness. One day you're mixing cocktails, the next you can perform a leap of faith off a skyscraper. Not ideal for maintaining a normal life, but extremely useful when you're humanity's last hope against a solar apocalypse, because that's what Desmond becomes. He and his assassin allies locate the Grand Temple in Turin, New York, a massive ISU complex housing a device built by the Capitoline Triad. Minerva, Jupiter, and Juno tested 6 different methods to deflect catastrophic solar flares. All 6 failed during the first catastrophe 75,000 years ago, but the device still works, and a second flare is coming in December 2012. Desmond gets a choice. Activate the device, save 7 billion people, and die. Or let the flare hit, let civilization collapse, and let humanity rebuild without ISU strings attached. He touches the device. And here's where his story becomes genuinely tragic. His sacrifice saves the world. It also releases Juno's imprisoned consciousness into global digital infrastructure. He dies a martyr for humanity and accidentally becomes the liberator of a digital god who wants to enslave them. A bartender from New York dying in a cave, saving everyone, and doming them in the same breath. But at least Desmond got closure. The person who picks up his torch doesn't even get that much. The Layla Hassan paradigm shift. Layla Hassan is what happens when a franchise decides political conspiracy isn't enough anymore. She starts as an Abstergo researcher with zero factional loyalty, just a brilliant engineer who wants to push the Animus further than corporate bureaucracy will allow. When her discoveries threaten to expose things Abstergo would rather keep buried, she tells them to get lost and joins the assassins on her own terms. But here's where her story goes from corporate whistleblower to actual science fiction protagonist. During her exploration of Cassandra's memories, Layla encounters Cassandra herself, in the flesh, still alive, over 2,000 years old, kept breathing by the staff of Hermes Trismegistus, an ISU artifact that just casually grants extended life like that's a normal thing a stick can do. Cassandra passes the staff to Layla, and suddenly, our former cubicle dweller is holding a weapon that predates human civilization. Then things get properly weird. Beneath Norway, Layla finds the Yggdrasil Chamber, a massive ISU installation running simulations complex enough to model multiple timelines. Trapped inside is Basim, who is actually the ISU god Loki wearing a human suit. And Layla has to make a choice. She gives up her body, completely. She remains in the machine as the reader, a disembodied consciousness observing possible futures and nudging them toward better outcomes. Basim escapes with the staff. Layla becomes something that isn't quite human and isn't quite ISU, floating through probability space for eternity. The parallel with Desmond is deliberate and painful. Both sacrifice their physical bodies to machines built by gods, but Desmond's sacrifice is about death. Layla's sacrifice is about transcendence. She doesn't die, she becomes something else entirely. Here's the thing nobody talks about. Layla's choice inverts the entire Isu project. The whole point of Isu civilization was using humans as tools, engineering them to serve. Layla willingly becomes something akin to an Isu, not because she's forced or tricked, but because she chooses it. In service of understanding rather than control, the franchise went from shadowy corporation wants a magic orb to what does it mean to be human when you can upload yourself into a precursor supercomputer, which is, a bit of a tonal shift, but if you think uploading your consciousness into an alien computer is the wildest the lore gets, wait until you hear about the event that started all of this, the one that nearly wiped out 2 entire species and set everything else in motion, the Great Cataclysm and the Solar Flare Endgame. Here's the thing nobody tells you about Assassin's Creed. Every hidden blade, every leap of faith, every conspiracy stretching back thousands of years exists because the sun is going to try to kill everyone again and nobody can agree on how to prepare for it. Around 75,000 BCE, a coronal mass ejection hit Earth while the ISU and humans were too busy killing each other to notice it coming. The war distracted both species from the one threat that didn't care about ideology. The Grand Temple coordinated 6 experimental planetary defense methods across Isu sites worldwide. All 6 failed. One might have worked given more time, but time was the one resource nobody had left, so both civilizations nearly went extinct, and the records were preserved as a tragic archive for whoever came next, which is, not ideal. Fast forward to December 2012. Same solar cycle, same threat, different species holding the bag. Desmond's sacrifice absorbs and redirects the energy, leaving Earth mostly unaffected. But activating that device also releases Juno into the world's digital infrastructure, so humanity survives the sun and immediately inherits a god with a grudge. Great. Add that to the list, but the real kicker is that this isn't over. Solar cycles recur on astronomical timescales. A third disaster remains possible. Entities like the Reader, Basim, and the Instruments of the First Will all operate against this backdrop of inevitable cosmic repetition. The universe periodically renders judgment on civilizations through impersonal events, and what matters is how each generation balances control versus freedom under that pressure. And that's the spine of the entire franchise. The Assassin-Templar debate isn't political, it's existential. Templars argue that only centralized control can navigate species-level threats. Assassins maintain that survival without freedom isn't survival at all. Every vault, every artifact, every betrayal across 10,000 years of history is just 2 groups of people screaming at each other about how to not die when the sky catches fire again. Assassin's Creed was never about hidden blades. It was always about whether freedom is worth the risk of extinction. And after 75,000 years, nobody has an answer. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.